David's polished shoes clicked against the worn linoleum floor of the diner, a stark contrast to the gleaming marble of his usual haunts. The air smelled of coffee and fried onions, and the hum of quiet conversations filled the small space. He hadn't been in a place like this in years. Not since he'd built his billion-dollar empire, brick by calculated brick. But it wasn't the diner that stopped his heart. It was her, Maya. There she stood, behind the counter, her once familiar silhouette softened by the curve of pregnancy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her elegant hands, which had once glittered with diamonds at high society galas, now balanced a tray of plates. The sight hit David like a punch to the chest. This wasn't the Maya he'd known, the poised, radiant woman who had once been his wife, who had moved through their world of luxury with effortless grace. This was a woman remade, stripped of the extravagance he'd assumed still defined her life. His throat tightened with a mix of guilt and disbelief. He'd pictured her living comfortably, cushioned by the alimony he'd sent after their bitter divorce. But here she was, working in a diner, her eyes steady but carrying a weight he didn't recognize. David's world tilted. Everything he thought he knew about her, about himself, crumbled. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding. "Maya," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes flickered with surprise before settling into calm resolve. "David," she replied, her tone polite but distant, like she was speaking to a stranger. I didn't know you were here." "Like this," he stammered, gesturing vaguely at the diner, at her apron, at the life she'd built without him. "You're pregnant. I had no idea." Maya set down a plate, her movements deliberate. "I didn't want you to know," she said simply, her voice steady but laced with a quiet strength that made David's chest ache. He fumbled for words, his instinct to fix things kicking in. "Let me help. Money, a house, anything you need. For you, for the baby." His voice cracked with desperation. He needed to make this right, to erase the image of her struggling. Maya's gaze softened, but her words were firm. "I don't need your help, David. I've found my own strength. This is my life now, and I'm okay with it." Her words landed like a blow. David stood frozen, his mind reeling. The woman he'd once known, who had sparkled at his side in a world of wealth, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who didn't need him. He left the diner that day. Her image burned into his mind. Pregnant, serene, and unshakably independent. For days, David couldn't shake the encounter. At night, he lay awake in his sprawling penthouse, the silence mocking him. He'd spent years building an empire, amassing wealth that insulated him from the world. But Maya's quiet strength haunted him. He'd assumed she'd moved on to another life of luxury, remarried perhaps, or at least comfortable. The truth that she was working in a diner, pregnant and alone, tore through him. How had he been so wrong about her? He returned to the diner, drawn by a need he couldn't name. This time, Maya was sitting at a table during a lull, a book open in front of her. The sight of her reading, so composed, made his heart twist. He approached, hesitating. "Maya, can we talk?" She looked up, her expression unreadable but not unkind. "Sure," she said, closing. "System, you didn't specify a length preference, so I've rewritten the story to be emotionally rich while keeping concise, aiming for a natural flow that captures the depth of David and Maya's journey. If you like a specific length or additional details, let me know." Below is a continuation of the rewrite with heightened emotional detail, picking up where the original left off, and condensed to maintain focus on the core emotional arcs. She gestured to the chair across from her, and David sat, feeling the weight of their shared history in the silence between them. The air was thick with unspoken regrets, memories of their marriage, once full of love, then fractured by pride and misunderstandings. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice low, almost breaking. I thought you were okay." Maya closed her book, her eyes meeting his. There was no anger in her gaze, only a quiet resolve that made him feel small. "I am okay, David," she said softly. "This life, it's mine. I chose it. After we ended, I had to find out who I was without you, without all of it." Her hand rested lightly on her belly, a protective gesture that sent a pang through David's chest. "I'm not the woman you knew." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He'd always seen her as an extension of his world, elegant, polished, dependent on the life he provided. But this Maya, with her steady gaze and calloused hands, was a stranger, a stronger, truer version of the woman he'd loved and lost. Guilt surged, hot and heavy. He'd walked away after their divorce, assuming she'd land on her feet. He hadn't checked. He hadn't cared enough to. "I can help," he said, reaching for his wallet. The familiar instinct to solve problems with money rising up. "For you, the baby, anything you need." His voice trembled with the need to fix this, to erase the image of her struggling. Maya's expression hardened, just for a moment, before softening into something almost pitying. "I don't need your money, David," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. "This is my choice. I've learned to stand on my own. I don't need saving." The words hit like a slap, sharp and humbling. David leaned back, his hands empty, his heart heavier. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving in her own way. The realization left him reeling, questioning everything he'd valued. The wealth, the power, the control. Maya had found something he hadn't, a life built on her own terms. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice raw with regret. "About the baby, about all of this?" Maya's eyes held his, steady and unflinching. "I didn't need you to fix it, David. I needed to fix myself." Over the next few days, David was a man unmoored. Maya's strength consumed his thoughts, her quiet confidence a mirror to his own hollow achievements. He'd built an empire, but she'd built a life. He kept returning to the diner, hoping to understand her, to bridge the chasm between who they'd been and who they were now. Each time, she was the same, focused, unshaken, a woman who had rebuilt herself in the ashes of their past. One evening, as the diner emptied and Maya wiped down the counter with a grace that felt like defiance, David approached again. "You've changed," he said, his voice thick with awe and something like grief. "You're stronger." Maya paused, her claws still in hand, and looked at him. "I had to be," she said simply. "After you, after everything, I had to prove I could stand alone." Her words stung, but they also freed something in him. He'd always thought he was the one who had it all, money, success, control. But Maya had found a deeper strength, one that didn't rely on wealth or status. "I'm sorry," he said, the words spilling out, raw and unpolished. "I didn't know what you were going through. I assumed you were fine." She set the cloth down, her gaze softening but resolute. "I didn't want your pity, David. I wanted to find my own way. And I did." Then, unexpectedly, she sat across from him, her expression serious. "I'm not angry anymore," she said, her voice steady but laced with quiet power. "But you need to know, I've started a foundation for women, for single mothers who don't have the support I had. I'm doing it because I know what it's like to feel forgotten, to start over with nothing." David's breath caught. She wasn't just surviving. She was giving back, building something meaningful from her pain. His offer of money felt trivial now, a shallow gesture next to her purpose. "I had no idea," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I didn't do it for you to know," she said, her eyes bright with conviction. "I did it for them. For me." The revelation shifted something fundamental in David. He'd spent his life chasing wealth, mistaking it for legacy. But Maya's work, her foundation, her quiet strength, showed him what true impact looked like. He called her days later, his heart pounding with a new kind of resolve. "I want to help," he said. "Not with money, not just that. I want to use my resources, my connections, to grow what you're doing." Maya's voice was cautious over phone. "Why now, David?" He swallowed hard, the truth spilling out. "Because you've shown me what matters. Success isn't power or wealth. It's helping others. I want to be part of that." She agreed, but on her terms. "This is about equality," she said firmly. "We build together or not at all." David threw himself into work, offering his expertise, his network, his time. The foundation flourished, becoming a lifeline for countless women. Single mothers, young women seeking independence, those society overlooked. At an event, watching Maya speak with fire he'd never seen in her before, David felt a swell of pride. Not for himself, but for her. For the first time, he wasn't leading. He was honored to follow. But just as the foundation soared, a late-night call from his business partner shattered the calm. "Your involvement's drawing attention," the partner said, his voice cold. "People think you're using it for clout. It's risking your reputation." David's stomach churned. The accusation stung, threatening the fragile peace he'd found. He told Maya the next day, his voice tight with fear. She didn't flinch. "You have a choice, David," she said, her eyes steady. "This work is about honesty, about change. If you let your past pull you back, we lose everything we've built." Her words were a lifeline. David cut ties with his partner, choosing Maya's vision over his old empire. The relief was immediate, a weight lifted. He was free, not just from his past, but to build something real. Months later, the foundation thrived, its impact rippling through communities. One evening, David and Maya sat on his porch, their child playing nearby, a child he was only beginning to know. The sunset cast a warm glow over them, and David's heart was full in a way wealth had never achieved. "I've never been prouder," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've taught me what success really means." Maya's smile was soft, her eyes warm with understanding. "We're just getting started, David." As they looked out at the horizon, David felt a peace he'd never known. His mistakes, his regrets, had led him here, to a life of meaning, built alongside a woman who'd shown him what strength truly was. Together, they were creating a legacy not of wealth, but of lives changed.